Today we're going to pull back the curtain on your own mind and look at something you do every single second of every day, how you experience reality. But here's the twist. We're going to see how your brain is less like a perfect camera and a lot more like a creative and sometimes pretty deceptive movie editor.
So let me just start by asking you this. Is what you're experiencing right now, watching this, hearing my voice, is it a perfect one-to-one copy of the world? Or is it a carefully constructed story your brain is telling you, editing out the boring parts and highlighting what it thinks you need to see?
Okay, just take a look at this. It's a classic. Your brain is probably screaming that one of these vertical lines is obviously longer than the other. But guess what? They're not. They are exactly the same length. I promise. This isn't a trick of your screen. This is a feature of your brain's operating system. And this simple little illusion, it tells us something so fundamental about our minds.
To really understand what just happened inside your own head, we have to break down the two core processes that literally build your world from the ground up: sensation and perception.
This right here is the key difference. Sensation, that's just the raw data. It's light waves hitting your eyes, sound waves hitting your ears. It's the automatic biological part. But perception, that's where the magic happens. Perception is what your brain does with all that data. It's the psychological part, the interpretation, the bit that gives it all meaning. Think of it like this. Sensation is just the list of ingredients. Perception is the finished meal.
And your brain doesn't cook that meal from scratch every single time. That would be exhausting, right? Instead, it takes these amazing shortcuts using something called top-down processing. Basically, your brain uses everything it already knows, all your memories, your expectations, the context of the situation, to make a really fast, educated guess about what your senses are telling it. It's a huge time saver.
And this is a perfect example. You can read that jumbled up sentence with no problem at all. But why? It's because your brain isn't reading it letter by letter. It's using top-down processing. It sees the first and last letters, it recognizes the overall shape of the word, and it just fills in the blanks based on its massive library of language. Your perception is literally correcting the bad data on the screen for you. Pretty cool, huh?
Okay, so now that we've got the basics down, let's dive into some real-world examples of how all this works. And we're going to start with one of the most personal things we can feel: the science of pain and touch. We've all seen it, right? An athlete takes a huge hit on the field. They just shake it off and keep going. So are they just built differently? Or is their brain literally experiencing that pain in a different way than the rest of us? Well, the science says, yeah, their experience is different, and for some really fascinating reasons. First, there's the physiological side. Intense exercise floods their bodies with endorphins, which are basically the body's natural painkillers. But then there's this huge psychological piece. Athletes are actually trained to manage pain signals. They use things like focused attention, positive self-talk, or even dissociation, where they mentally separate themselves from the physical feeling. Their perception is actively turning down the volume on the sensation of pain.
All right, let's get even more personal. It sounds like something out of a movie, but is there any actual science to the idea that love can conquer pain? Can just looking at a picture of someone you care about act like a painkiller?
The answer is a pretty amazing yes. But here's the really cool part. It's not just a simple distraction, like doing a puzzle to take your mind off it. Studies show that looking at a photo of a romantic partner actually activates the brain's deep, primitive reward centers. It kicks off a flood of dopamine. That's the brain's main feel-good chemical. This process basically mimics how opioid painkillers work, which is a way more powerful and fundamental mechanism than just shifting your attention. The power of our senses goes way beyond just managing pain. For a newborn baby, the simple sensation of touch isn't just nice, it is a literal lifeline. Studies have found that immediate skin-to-skin contact is linked to an incredible 36% lower mortality rate in low birth weight infants. It actually helps regulate their heart rate, their temperature, their stress. It's this powerful reminder that our senses aren't just for experiencing the world, they're for surviving in it.
So, from that fundamental need for touch, let's switch gears to our most dominant sense, the one that really paints our entire world for us: vision. And if you thought touch was subjective, just wait till we get into how your brain builds everything you see. So here's a very modern problem. All around the world, more and more people, especially kids, are becoming nearsighted. And it's easy to blame screens, but could the real issue be what we're not doing? Could a simple lack of bright, outdoor sunlight be physically changing the shape of our eyes? The numbers are pretty stark. By 2050, it's projected that half the entire world's population will be nearsighted. Now, a leading theory isn't just about looking at stuff up close. It's that spending so much time indoors deprives our eyes of bright, natural light. This light is believed to trigger the release of dopamine in the retina, and that dopamine acts like a signal that tells the eye, okay, slow down your growth. Without enough of it, the eye might grow just a little too long, and that's what causes nearsightedness.
Okay, so now for a quick demonstration of just how much your brain edits your vision. Let's find your blind spot. Go ahead, you can do this right now. Cover your left eye, and with your right eye, just stare directly at that cross. Now, slowly move your head a little closer to the screen or maybe a little farther away. At a certain point, poof, that dot on the right will completely vanish. That spot is a real, physical gap in your retina. But you don't walk around seeing a black hole in your vision, do you? Nope. Because your brain's perception engine just paints right over the gap, filling it in with its best guess of what should be there.
So we know our brains influence what we feel and literally what we see, but our senses are also constantly picking up on these subtle, hidden signals that shape how we interact with each other, often completely unconsciously.
Think about the snap judgments we make about people. Does the actual sound of someone's voice, just the pitch, change how you perceive their authority or even their competence? While the research is pretty clear on this one, yeah, it absolutely does. We tend to perceive people with lower-pitched voices as more dominant and more powerful. The theory is that this is an old evolutionary shortcut, where our brain just equates a deep voice with a larger physical size. But, and this is where perception gets really interesting, it's not that simple. For female leaders, for example, a lower pitch doesn't always make them seem more trustworthy. It just goes to show how our brain's shortcuts are layered with all sorts of social context.
All right, here's a really counterintuitive one for you. We wear safety gear, like a helmet, to be safer, of course. But could the feeling of being safe actually cause our brains to unconsciously take more risks?
This idea has a name. It's called risk compensation. And in some controlled lab studies, it seems to be a real thing. One experiment found people took more risks in a computer game when they were wearing a helmet. But, and this is the really important part, when researchers look at the real world, that evidence mostly vanishes. Reviews of how cyclists actually behave find no strong link between wearing a helmet and riding more recklessly. So while the theory is an interesting quirk of perception, the bottom line is clear. Helmets are proven to save lives, and those benefits far outweigh any tiny potential for risk-taking.
So, we've seen how your brain interprets pain, literally fills in the gaps in your vision, and even reacts to hidden social cues. Let's kind of zoom out and put the final pieces of this incredible puzzle together. Look, if you take away just one thing from all this, let it be this. Your experience of the world is an active creation. It is not a passive recording. Your senses are out there gathering all the raw footage, but it's your brain with all of its biases and memories and expectations that's sitting in the director's chair, editing all that data into the seamless story that you call reality. And that leaves us with one last really fascinating question to think about. If my perception is shaped by my unique brain and my life experiences, and yours is shaped by yours, are we ever really experiencing the same world? Or are we all, in a very real sense, just living in our own private, beautifully constructed realities?